So my story was about the earliest point I can remember is when my parents got divorced, and that was around when I was 8 years old. It was a very difficult time in our family. Both my parents are believers, but we didn't go to church a whole lot that I can remember. And so whenever they got divorced, my mom was working 2 jobs. She had us 3 kids almost full time, and so I ended up taking care of my sisters a lot. It wasn't an easy time for any of us, to be honest. And so when I went to my dad's, we didn't go to church much, and we didn't go to church when we were with my mom either. And that kind of continued throughout my childhood. We just didn't go a lot. When my mom married my first stepdad, her second husband, we went a little bit. We started going to a place called Adel Community, and I got a little bit involved in the youth group for a little while there. This was when I was in 8th grade. We went to church camp that year. I went to church camp for the first time, and throughout that whole week, every night some of my friends were going down front to accept Christ. And at the time, I really didn't know anything about him. It was my first time really at a church camp. But I felt like I needed to go down front to be accepted kind of by others and to be friends with all those guys and stuff. So the last night I went down front, and at that time I had accepted Christ. And so coming back, it wasn't a big deal. Wasn't really much of a change. I just went on being who I was. And then I got into high school. High school does a lot of things to you. It gives you a lot of temptation. It gives you a lot of hard times. And so I didn't go to church anymore. I didn't really go very often at all. I started hanging out with a bunch of my friends and stuff. And senior year was kind of a relaxed year. I didn't really do nothing. I hung out a lot with a lot of friends. We hung out a lot at night. That was when I started to experiment a little bit with things I probably shouldn't have been, like alcohol and girls and stuff like that. And it wasn't really rampant or anything like that. It just was trying stuff out. I was bored. I didn't do anything. I didn't have any kind of athletics or anything like that, so I just kind of did what I wanted to. That year I got a job, stuff like that. So there was all that kind of stuff. Had money to go do stuff and blow and all that kind of stuff. So after my senior year, though, we moved away. We moved to a place called Toyota, Texas. It's up between Lubbock and Amarillo. We moved up there with my second stepfather, my mom's third husband, and started to hang out with people more often, do a little more. Out in Toyota, there's just not anything. It's just all pastures and cornfields and all that kind of stuff, and there's just not a lot out there. It's a bunch of farmland. During that time, there was a lot of partying out in the pasture. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. Still, like I said, I may not have known who Christ was, but I lived kind of like I did. So I wasn't really that bad of a kid. I didn't really do a lot of things wrong. So I stayed pretty clean, pretty clear from everything. Well, when we moved back, after my mom got a divorce from him, we moved back, and we moved back to Bridgeport, and I started to live. We're living with my grandmother, and my mom was trying to get back on her feet. They decided to move back to Peaster to go to school. And so I stayed behind because I got a job in the oil field during that time. And so I stayed behind. I started hanging out with some people in the really wrong crowd. And I started to experiment a lot more with other things. I experimented a little more with girls. I did a lot more drinking, a lot more partying. Ventured out to places I shouldn't have. And some of that. And so during that time, it was a pretty trying time for me. I was dating a girl back in Weatherford, or in Brock, and one night I was coming back and forth from there, and we were racing back from there to Brock, from Millstep to Brock, and we were on the service road of I-20. She had a really nice diesel truck, super chipping and all that kind of stuff, and I had a little old granny car. I liked to go fast in it though, because I was a child, and we were doing probably 115, 120, something like that. And for some reason, it clicked in my mind that earlier there was a state trooper there watching and doing speed trapping and stuff like that. And so I started to slow down as I came up to Brock Junction, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if my tires got crazy or if I hit a spot. I think I hit a spot of gravel of some sort. It got kind of turned off. Well, next thing I knew, I was sliding down the embankment down to I-20 from the service road. as I was sliding down, I turned my wheel and was coming back up towards the service road. And when I did that, I was still doing probably 60 or 70 miles an hour. I was coming back. I noticed that I was coming back across the road. The road was running kind of like this, and I was coming back across it. So I jerked my wheel back to the right again. And when I did that, I flipped around completely and lost unconsciousness. So I don't remember. I blacked out at that point. I don't remember anything after that, except that my girlfriend, she was behind me, and my car spun around and faced hers. And when I did that, she said that my front end of my nose just flew up in the air. And when it landed, it rolled about another 9 times after that. And I was completely gone. And the next thing I remember is waking up in the vehicle, right into the hospital. And I noticed that my finger was cut real bad. And I had kind of a terrible headache. And then I went back to sleep again and don't remember anything until I woke up on the hospital bed. When I woke up on the hospital bed, there was nurses all around me rushing, and they were cutting my shirt up, and they were lifting me off of one gurney on the hospital bed, and I remember them talking about how they were working on my finger and how there was stuff messed up on that, and my head was swelling and all this kind of stuff. And during the same time, the state troopers at the time that had went to my wreck followed the ambulance to the hospital, asked me questions when I woke up. And they were asking me stuff about, license and do I have my registration on, what was I doing, but they told me something that stuck in my mind. They told me they'd never seen anybody walk away from a wreck like that bad. And it kind of stuck in my mind because I think to myself, state troopers see a lot of wrecks. They on the highway, they see a whole lot of them, and, where there's death involved, where there's not death involved. And for them to say that they've seen that wreck and never seen anybody walk away from it, and here I am, laying in a hospital with my finger messed up and a scratch on my head. I felt, I honestly, I didn't know what I felt because I didn't know why I was fortunate enough to continue living. After I got out of the hospital and then I got home, it really troubled me that I, for about 3 days or so, it was just back and forth in my mind. Why was I allowed to live? Why did I die? Why did I live? Why did I? And I thought about it, and then after 3 days, man, it just left my mind again, and I went on about my ways. And, after that, I formed a friendship, or a kind of rejoined friendship with now she's my wife, but she was my best friend at the time, and we hung out a lot more, and I started coming over. She'd come pick me up from Bridgeport and bring me over to Weatherford to go to church and stuff like that on the weekends and stuff, and we started just hanging out more and more, and I fell in love with her, and so I moved over this way. I left my job in the oil field and moved over this way, and we started dating and stuff, and I was going to church a lot more often and everything, and we were, at the time I was old enough to be in the youth group, and so we were in the youth group with my now my mentor and good friend, but Dr. Mike Bazell, our youth pastor, and he was teaching on a subject of being saved and salvation and stuff like that. It was one of those things like, you know a person by their fruits, and a person's saved by their fruits and stuff like that. I just wasn't so sure that I was. I wasn't unsure that I was, but I wasn't sure that I was, and so I started talking to him more often in the next coming days, and I was talking to him about whether or not I was saved or not, and questioning whether or not I was and stuff, and he gave me some just good wisdom and just told me to pray and just figure out whether or not I felt like I was saved, if I did it for just my friends or if I went through the motions or if it was for real. And so I prayed about it, and I really thought about it for the next week or so, and the next Wednesday after we got done with church on my drive home, I was driving home by myself, and I just really felt that I hadn't actually accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And so that night on my drive home, just eyes full of tears, I just went ahead and just asked God in my heart, and it's amazing the transformation that happens when you accept Christ. That night I went to bed and everything, and I was super excited. The next morning I woke up cursing and cussing and stuff that was not even a part of my vocabulary anymore. Wasn't even an issue. And so it's miraculous some of the things He does in your life. That when He actually comes into your heart and takes captive of your heart, He penetrates your whole life, not just some of it. And so seeing that transformation immediately was amazing, and then ever since then, I've been a totally different person compared to what I used to be. I used to be shallow and a bully and rude, and me and my wife can attest to that. But ever since He's came into my heart and my life, He's changed me into a more joyful person, way less shallow, more caring about people, and some of that. So it's just really just transformed me. I'm not finished yet. It's a work in progress. Here I am 6 or 7 years later, and God's still working in my life. He's got me implanted in ministries now, and I'm a huge part of C2 now and the leadership on that. And so, there's some verses that stick in my head that I want to leave you with. Isaiah 40:28 says, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? Yahweh is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never grows faint or weary. There is no limit to His understanding." Romans 1:16 says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes." And last but not least, Romans 12:2. "Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is good, pleasing, and perfect will of God." That's kind of my theme verse on my arm. I have it right here tattooed on my arm. It's something that I have to constantly remind myself after accepting Christ. Things don't always get easier. They sometimes get more difficult. Not to say that in a bad way too. They get more joyful, but things aren't always just pish-posh perfect. So I have it on my arm to remind me to constantly renew my mind and not to be of this world. Constantly be renewing my mind, constantly be transforming my thoughts, and constantly keeping my eyes on God and keeping my head in the Word. My name's Clayton Rhine. That's my story. What's yours?